I'm joined now by the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. Thanks so much for joining me.
It's good to be with you, Brian. Thank you.
So, obvious question. You've been a prosecutor. You were a prosecutor for 30 years almost. Your reaction to the Republican nominee for president being a 34-time convicted felon, and for his party, a party that brands itself the Law and Order Party, falling over themselves to back him?
Well, I mean, let's level set. So, 6-week trial, 12 jurors of his peers unanimously returned verdicts on 34 felony counts. They reviewed evidence, they reviewed the law. His attorney actively participated in choosing that jury. His defense attorney actively made decisions about which witnesses to call, actively engaged in cross-examining the prosecution's witness, and they returned a verdict. And I think that when you look at what we've seen as the response from the former president and his allies, I mean, their criticism of a system that is a fair system speaks, I think, badly about how they prioritize the rule of law in America. The way I break it down is this. I think that part of what you can attribute to the response that you're getting from him is, cheaters don't like to get caught, and they don't like to be held accountable.
Now, switching gears a little bit, Byron Donalds came out recently and kind of perplexingly expressed a kind of nostalgia for the Jim Crow era, notwithstanding the fact that Byron Donalds himself is black, notwithstanding the fact that he's in an interracial marriage. Can you speak on this eagerness to embrace racism that's pervaded the GOP, especially among the unlikeliest of figures?
I mean, when I look at just what's happening coming out of elected officials from Florida, let's just start there. Yeah. Book bans. Now, the idea in 2024, we have book bans, which have focused on, for example, LGBTQ characters and authors, which are focusing on an attempt to erase, if not rewrite, America's history writ large, especially on the issue of race, the origins of slavery, the impact of slavery. And now to have someone, perpetuate that kind of approach, which is essentially, again, to attempt to erase or rewrite America's history. It is, I think, inexcusable at the highest level.
Donald Trump, too. I mean, this is going all the way up to the top of that party. Donald Trump himself has basically predicated his black outreach by associating people of color with criminality. Do you think that that's going to be an effective approach as we head toward November?
Absolutely not. And it's insulting.
Moving over to the issue of Dobbs, of abortion, June 24th is going to mark the 2-year anniversary of Dobbs. Republicans just this past week blocked a vote in the Senate to guarantee access to contraception, with only Murkowski and Collins crossing over. Can you speak about, I guess, as clearly and definitively as you can, what it would mean for contraception if Trump and Republicans took over?
I think that when you look at the blueprint for this, there are a couple things you can understand in terms of who's to blame and what's happening. You can look at the former Trump's presidency, right? The former President Trump's presidency, and when he was presented with the notion of a national ban, said that he would support it and sign it if it came to his desk when he was president. He hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade.
And bragged about that.
And they did as he intended, and he has since bragged about how proud he is of what he did. I also would point to the decision that court rendered undoing the protections of Roe, taking basic freedoms from the American people. Clarence Thomas, a member of the United States Supreme Court, said the quiet part out loud in that decision, which is that contraception was very much on the table, not to mention Obergefell. So regardless of one's gender, this issue of the taking of a fundamental freedom, the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, impacts everyone. And just sit back and think about it again. The notion that in our lifetime, just in the last 2 years, a basic freedom, literally about house and home, about the freedom to make decisions about your own body has been taken. If that's taken, I would suggest everything is on the table. And for that reason, everyone should be concerned and vigilant about fighting to protect freedoms. See the stakes at hand and at play in this election in 2024. Because believe you me, if Donald Trump is president again and a national abortion ban hits his desk, odds-on favorite, he signs it. And for all of our friends in California and New York and all these other states that have protected this freedom, don't get too comfortable.
Right. A nationwide ban on abortion is a nationwide ban.
A nationwide ban on abortion is a nationwide ban on abortion. And contraception, again, Clarence Thomas said that contraception would be... There was just a vote in the United States Senate where Republicans, to your point, in the United States Senate voted to not protect the right to contraception.
Right.
It's outrageous. It's outrageous. And it should concern all of us.
They're basically broadcasting what they're going to do. It's on us to believe them at this point. You know, Donald Trump specifically kind of enjoys perplexingly this branding as a moderate on this issue. Can you speak about just how conservatively he would rule on the issue of abortion if he became president?
Well, you know, there's a saying from Maya Angelou who famously said, when people tell you who they are the first time, you better listen. Yeah. He's told us who he is. Yeah. So let's not fall for the okie doke. Let's not get distracted. Let's not get gaslighted on this. Like, let's just not.
I want to talk about a very tragic story out of Mississippi. There was a 12-year-old girl who was raped. She became pregnant. Her parents weren't sure if she would qualify for the state's exemption to the abortion ban. Even if she was, it's unlikely that any doctor would have performed the procedure given how high the penalties are. And now, at 13 years old, 7th grade, she has an 8-month-old child. Can you speak about how commonplace instances like this would be if, again, Republicans were to take control?
I will tell you, you know that the majority of my career, you've mentioned this, in the beginning of my career, I was a prosecutor. What you may not know is one of the reasons why I became a prosecutor. I had a best friend in high school who I learned was being molested by her stepfather. And when I learned, I said to her, you have to come and stay with us. I called my mother. My mother said, of course she does. And she came to stay with us. And that's why I decided at a young age I wanted to do the work that was about, in particular, protecting women and children from violence. So I specialized in my career as a prosecutor, in particular on crimes of violence against women and children, with a particular emphasis on child sexual assault. The notion that any so-called leader would tell someone who experienced a crime of violence to their body, a violation of their body, that they have no right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That's immoral. It's truly immoral. Yeah. And my heart breaks when I learned about that story, knowing that that story is sadly not unique necessarily in terms of those kinds of cases happening. And, Brian, I think that we must all agree that one does not have to abandon their faith. You don't have to abandon your faith or deeply held beliefs to agree the government should not be telling her what to do with her body. Right? If you choose, the person will talk with their priest, their rabbi, their pastor, their imam, but it should not be the government telling people what to do. And the harm that has happened in real time since that decision came down 2 years ago, there are two essential, I think, compelling points about this issue. One, the fact and the notion that such a fundamental right has been taken. And then what we know we must do, the court took the right, Congress can put it back in place. But the fundamental notion about the taking of freedom. But the second compelling point on this, equally compelling, the harm that has happened every day in America based on the stories we know, which I know are just a fraction of what's happening every day in America. Imagine, for example, on public policy, I feel so strongly. We can talk in lofty terms about public policy. One must always ask, how does this affect a real person? So here's the thing. On abortion, the majority of women who get abortions are mothers, okay? In the South, every state except Virginia has an abortion ban. Okay, let's assume there is a mother somewhere in the South who needs abortion care. God help her if she's got paid family leave. God help her if she has affordable childcare. God help her if she's got some extra savings to afford a plane or bus or train ticket. And then imagine what that means. And again, this is what I mean, real life, like think about this. So she's gotta go to an airport, stand in a TSA line, get on a plane sitting next to a complete stranger or two, because she can't have her best friend with her because the best friend is taking care of the kids, to go to a city she's never been, to get the care she wants and needs, to have to go right back and get on that plane because she can't afford to be gone that long. Think about what we're forcing people to do. The levels of harm and the unfairness of this, it's profound. It's profound.
That was well said. I want to switch gears a little bit here. Looking at recent Republican primaries, we've seen 15, 20, 25% of voters vote for Nikki Haley. Now, Nikki Haley is basically just a vehicle for anti-Trump sentiment at this point. I don't think there's some rabid, fanatical Nikki Haley base in the Republican Party, but still, these voters are disgusted enough with Trump to show up at the polls in these primaries and register their dissatisfaction with him. So what's your message to those voters, these Republican base voters who, again, are disgusted enough to take time out of their day to cast these ballots against him in their own primary?
Yeah, Brian, I think that for the non-Trump Republican voter, we've been very clear. There's room in our campaign. And, frankly, you don't have to look much further than our opposition, the former president, who has pretty much said he doesn't care about those voters. And we've let him know there's room in our campaign if you care about democracy, if you care about fighting for freedoms, if you care about rule of law. There's room in our party and in our campaign for that voter. And, there is everything about fighting for democracy, rule of law, fundamental freedoms that is really the highest stakes of this election in November. And we welcome folks knowing that we may not agree on everything. But I think some of the biggest stakes of this campaign and this election cycle are the issues that we agree on.
Let's finish off with this. The flip side of that is young voters, progressive voters, who may feel unhappy about the way that things have progressed in Israel and Gaza, with inflation, with housing, whatever the issue is, who want to show up and kind of cast a vote to punish the Biden-Harris administration. What's your message to those people?
I mean, listen, I think, I did a college tour last fall, focused on college-aged folks. So it was universities, colleges, but also trade schools. And one of the reasons I did it is because I wanted to make sure that I would be out in the country where young voters are, listening to them. And what I heard were a variety of high priority issues that, if you look at the contrast, it's clear we stand with them and Trump does not. For example, I'd ask every group of young people, these young leaders, did you ever have to have an active shooter drill between kindergarten and 12th grade? Almost every hand went up. Yeah. Well, we support universal background checks. We support an assault weapons ban. We support red flag laws. We have stood up to the gun lobby. Not so much the other guy. In fact, he basically on this issue says, get over it, okay? Yeah. I'm paraphrasing. You look at it on the issue of the climate crisis. He made, it's reported, a promise to a bunch of potential donors. In exchange for $1 billion, he'll basically give credits to the big oil companies, right? And tap back against what we've been doing, which is putting in place rules that prioritize addressing the climate crisis. What we've done in terms of $1 trillion that we're going to have hit the streets of America over the course of the next 10 years to deal with climate adaptation and resilience, building a clean energy economy. These are the issues that young voters care about during the height of their reproductive years. The highest court just took a constitutional right. We're the ones fighting to get it back. The other guy is proud of what he did to take that right. And I could go on down the list. So there are certainly some other issues that we need to deal with. I mean, part of the second term agenda starting now is again, what we've got to do in getting under control of the housing price, and both in terms of affordability to be able to buy a house and rent. We got to get more work done in terms of what we can do around dealing with access to capital. That's work we've been doing, helping people have a leg up and be able to start, a family, start thinking about buying a home and not worrying about debt. That's one of the reasons we dealt with student loan debt against great opposition from the other side. So there are a lot of issues, and we got to get in front of them. And but I hear the frustration and to the examples that you are offering in terms of, for example, what's happening in the Middle East. I hear that, and I know and agree. We have called for this war to end. We have called for a ceasefire and get the hostages out, get aid in. So I understand where folks are coming from. Really do.
We'll leave it there. Vice President Harris, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian.